Hello and welcome to Console Shock, episode 65, retro and modern gaming chat with me, Trev and Stu.
Hey Trev, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Still under the old lockdown at the moment.
Yeah, I'm locked at home. Yeah, government's paying me.
Getting through some games?
I'm getting through some games, yeah. And
any good ones?
I'm playing the remake of Ratchet and Clank. We were actually walking past someone's house and he had like a box of books outside. I said, oh, you know, take a book or something. And they had Ratchet and Clank on the PS4 and FIFA 19. So I picked those both up.
As in the remake that came out, not
the remake. So I've always had in the back of my mind I wanted to play that. So yeah, I was quite chuffed with that. So I've been sort of smashing through that in the last few days. And that's it really.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird situation, isn't it? Really, normally we'd be like really happy to be able to sit at home and play games all day, but it'd be nice if we could go out occasionally during that sort of situation. But
yeah. You go out for a little bit of exercise and stuff. Yeah. So you just walk around sort of empty streets, and then you walk a few kilometres and you sort of walk back, and but you can't really sort of do anything. Nothing's really open except for sort of supermarkets and sort of corner shops and stuff, but yeah, not much to do.
Well, one good thing that's come out of this is you can post stupid shit to YouTube, and that is what we are doing right now, isn't that right, Stu?
Yeah, that's right. Let's do it.
Nothing better to do. Let's just sit around, talk about games in our hopefully fully clothed at home, not avoiding deadly diseases, which is about the best thing we can do at the moment. So that being said, so we had a guest on quite a few months ago, actually. We couldn't believe how long ago it was. It was last September. One of our favourite YouTubers. If you like jacking in old consoles into like all kinds of ridiculous TVs, like we've talked before of show about, we've got these sort of 4K TVs, and we're getting some of that sweet 240p action on those screens and upscaling it to within an inch of its life so it will fit on the screen, seeing all those lovely artifacts, probably adding a ton of lag. Well, this guy we've got on today, he is the buster of lag. He is the destroyer of artifacts.
The buster of lag.
Yeah, he is the human SCART switch, in my opinion. Yeah. It is Bob joining us again from RetroRGB. Thanks for jumping on again, Bob.
Thanks for having me. Always fun to talk to you guys.
So yeah, it was been a while since you've last been on, and funny enough, we could lead in with one thing that you sort of alluded to last time. I think we were mentioning about the fact, wouldn't it be great if there was just these things could come out that had a single cable where you could just plug a cable into like a Saturn or a PS1 or a Mega Drive, Genesis, SNES, and it goes straight to HDMI. Well, it turned out you kind of said, well, there's something coming out. I can't really talk about it a lot, but it came out. So yeah, the Rad2X cables. So what are your quick thoughts on those for anybody that's listening to Console Shock hasn't heard about them?
I mean, I still love them. I'm obviously friends with Mike Chi and with Rob, but anybody that's friends with me knows that if I have anything to say about your products, I never hold back. So it's I always disclose that I'm friends with them, but it's the praise is absolutely deserved. It's basically just something that you plug into these consoles and it outputs 480p HDMI with no lag. It's not the sharpest solution out there. It's not the cheapest solution out there, but it's the only one that's actually worth buying. And there's those other cables that are, generic or labeled. They all look the same with 10 different names, and they're absolute garbage. And the people that make them know they're garbage. And there's even a whole backstory behind that as to why they decided to even make those in the first place. So don't support clones. Don't support pieces of junk that are just out there to take people's money. Go and buy the stuff that's actually designed for this. Sadly, at this exact moment, you can't buy a Rad2X because everything got delayed because of the crisis and everything. But those should be back in stock, reasonably soon. Yeah,
because it's sort of coming off from that, and it'll probably lead into another sort of bit of advice you can maybe throw out at us and our audience. I'm in sort of a situation, I think, Stuart, you're all sort of the same, where we've probably already got a nice sort of SCART switch going on. So we're quite happy that we've kind of spent money on really good SCART cables coming out of our Genesis, PS1, Super Nintendos, even like NESs that we might have got modded for RGB and all that kind of stuff. So probably the solution of a single HDMI to the back of the console cable might not actually work, because we've kind of got the point where we've got everything going through a SCART switch. So what would you say will be the best option if you've kind of got nice RGB SCART cables, you've got a nice SCART switch, it's just getting that into the back of the TV?
So there's two, and one of them is actually another thing I wasn't able to talk about last time I was on. But if you just want it to work, so if you're a streamer, if as long as you're not upper level pro that wants to look super fancy, like if you're just a streamer, or if you just want your image on your flat screen, so like let's say you have a G-SCART switch and a bunch of RGB consoles and an RGB monitor, but sometimes you just want to play on a flat screen. The same person, Mike Chi, the same person who makes the Rad2X or designed the Rad2X, has something called the 2X SCART, which essentially it's the same theory. It just doubles it to 480p, zero lag. It's got scan lines, which is pretty cool for people, and filters. And I actually enjoy the filters for 3D games, not 2D games. But and that's it. And it's under $100, and you just plug it in. And I'm working with a few people, with Tien Fang and with Greg Collins from Laser Bear, of course, to make a SCART coupler, which I've showed off kind of teasers of in different videos, but as long as you have good cable management and you don't, put all the pressure on your switch, you could just plug stuff like the 2X SCART directly into your G-SCART switch and not even need a SCART cable. So less cables, less mess.
That's cool.
Yeah,
those are pretty much the
RetroTink one. Is that what it's known as?
So RetroTink is the line of products, and then there's the 2X, 2X SCART, 2X Pro. And then, the same exact theory. So, easy way to connect it to your G-SCART, works with the coupler that's going to be released soon. But super high end is the OSSC, the open source scan converter. And if you want, you can just plug that in and leave it in generic mode and it'll work. But there's still compatibility issues with certain TVs. And that's why if you just want to do a plug and play solution, then I really recommend the 2X SCART, because it's just no fuss. It just works. But if you're a perfectionist, if you don't mind tinkering, or if you enjoy it like I do, the OSSC really is the one to get. But just keep in mind that every time you switch consoles, you have to switch profiles. You have to set the phase for each console, and you're only going to do that once. So if you have a setup with 8 consoles, you have to go through and set up the profiles for each of your individual consoles. But then that's it. So switching back and forth, and you do need to know resolutions, because there's, most consoles run at one main resolution, and then a couple games run at alternates. So you'd have to really know which is which. And if you're already into all that, it's actually quite easy. Once you've got everything tweaked, it's just, grab a remote and flip the profile. But getting all that set up, learning about all that stuff, it's just too much for most people. Most people just want to plug it in and have it go. So now, for the first time ever, though, we have solutions on both sides. We have the reasonably priced and easy 2X SCART, or the OSSC, which isn't much more expensive, but it's more of an expert option.
Is there a good website that you can sort of go to that and say, okay, if I've got a PAL PlayStation 1, I'm putting it through the OSSC, and what's the resolution? Is there some way you can get that information and literally just sit down for when you buy it for 45 minutes and update it as much as you can? So then
so there's a member of the retro gaming community called Firebrand X, and what he's done is taken the research that other people have done in figuring out the exact specs of each resolution. And I'm oversimplifying a bit, but there's a lot of things. It's not just like 320 by 240. There's timings, and there's very specific analog video related things involved in that. So a lot of people have figured out what all of those are. So Firebrand X has double checked all of them and then created profiles with all of that data in it. So rather than manually figure all this stuff out, which is, this was years worth of work all compiled in, all you have to do is download his set of profiles, put them on your OSSC, and then just all you have to do is tweak the phase for each one. So,
cool. And sorry, what do you mean by phase?
So the best way to describe it is, if you look at something like a checkerboard pattern or a striped pattern, and something's out of phase, it's almost like it being out of focus.
Right. Okay.
So imagine focusing a camera, but when it goes out of focus, you get video interference as well as it being out of focus.
Yeah.
So if you have the 240p test suite for any console that it has it on, you could just load up the checkerboard pattern, tweak the phase until at the very least the center is clean. Some consoles are noisy, so you still have some interference on the sides. But if you have the 240p test suite and a way to actually launch it, a ROM cart or CDs or something like that, setting phase is like a 2-minute thing. And then as long as it's that same console, like that same Super Nintendo, then you never have to touch it again. But you change the cable, change the power supply, change the console to a different Super Nintendo, you'd have to reset it then.
Okay, right, understand.
That's really, yeah. So there is a bit of work involved. I mean, I think a good way of sort of putting it is like the RetroTink 2X SCART, which is probably what I'm going to go for. You could just plug in, fire and forget kind of thing.
There is no tweaking. Yeah, you just plug it in. Yeah. You don't have to worry about phase because of the way it accomplishes the generic line double. And you don't if you put them side by side on a 4K TV. First of all, you're going. The OSSC goes up to 1080p, and the 2X Pro is 480p. So the OSSC is obviously going to be sharper, and you can dial in a better signal. But for most people, it doesn't affect the experience. Whereas those cheap knockoff cables, when it treats progressive as interlaced, you have like Super Mario World shaking on the screen because it's got that interlaced jitter to it. And that gives me a bad headache. Yeah, and on top of that, too, it's like, variable lag between 2.5 and 4 frames, depending on the device. So, or more.
Yeah, and lag is like a lot of people don't really understand the importance of it. I mean, there's a similar argument about like why 60 frames per second is better than 30 frames a second. And if you like maybe showed someone the difference side by side, they might not be like, well, it's a bit smoother, but you can actually feel that. You can feel, certainly when you're moving a camera around with an analog stick, you can feel that it's more responsive. So it feels more responsive to you. And obviously that's important with these scalers because the big factor is obviously the lag, isn't it, Bob? Where the Amazon ones add tons on, and twitchy games, you'll really notice that. And that's a big problem with those cheaper devices.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that really frustrates me is the people that pretend like it isn't a problem. I think, I think generally speaking, people that have already bought the other solution, and when they realize it's bad, they feel stupid. So now they get angry, which I try so hard to never make anybody feel stupid. There's mostly never a stupid question. If you don't know where to look for the answers, how would you have found them anyway? So I don't think anybody using one of these other solutions should feel bad about it, but just learn and move on. But yeah, even so display lag, so the lag that you get in the flat screen TV, at least these days, is generally pretty consistent. So if you hold a lag testing device up to it and there's 8 milliseconds of lag or even 1.5 frames of lag, it's pretty much always about 1.5 frames. But if you use these scalers, you see it vary. And that's the other issue because you can't even just program your brain to deal with the delay. Now you actually have to, it's changing all the time. So it really, truly ruins the experience of games that were designed specifically for a zero lag environment. So like any platforming game on 8 or 16-bit consoles, anything that fighting games and action games, all of them will be affected by this. Pretty much everything but role playing. Yeah,
I think because it's probably a new concept for a lot of people that are perhaps our age but aren't as technically minded or interested in the technical side. They probably haven't had to. It's not a concept they've had to deal with. I mean, the only lag of any kind probably with an old console back in the day was how long it took for the controller to go to send its instructions to the console. There was no video processing on the TV itself. It was just splashing everything onto the screen on a CRT. So it was never an issue. But all of a sudden they're being told, "Oh, you've got to worry about lag. You've got to worry about lag," and they're like, "Why is this a thing?" So they're probably quite defensive when they're being told, you need to make sure you get a good TV that can help minimize that.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a couple pieces of lag. I keep meaning to do a video called "What is Lag?" to describe all this. There's just not enough hours in the day. But first, when you press the button on your controller, the time it takes from your controller to get to the console That's one place that lag is added these days.
Yeah.
Any kind of Bluetooth controller, whether it's modern consoles or new controllers for old consoles. And then, of course, how the system processes that input. And, you know, all games have a specific set of time that it takes for that input to be processed and spit out. And software emulation is where that could vary a lot as well. Whereas FPGA hardware emulation or original consoles, it's always, or I mean, with FPGA emulation, it's going to be the exact same as original consoles.
Yeah.
But with software emulation, that varies all the time. And then on the output side of it, the time it takes for, you know, the composite video plug on the back of your Sega Mega Drive to get to the top left corner of your CRT is less than 1 millisecond. So anything that you add on the outer end of that is now the third place. And if you have a scaler that adds lag and a TV that adds lag, that means those things like the classic consoles with a wireless controller, you're adding lag in basically 3 or 4 different places. You know, the controller, the software emulation, the processing chip, because those have inherent scalers in them, and then your TV. So that's why a lot of people don't seem to understand that you add all that up and you could have a 7 frame of lag difference from an original console, depending on the console and the scenario and stuff like that.
So a lot of people, I remember when I had my video game shop, that they would just, it doesn't feel like it used to. I used to be really good at it, and you know, you'll be, well, it could be the lag, it could, you know, what cable are you using, and then they're, oh no, I'm playing on emulation on this and on that, and I think a lot of people are almost like, oh, maybe I'm not as good, maybe I'm just a bit slower now that I'm older, and things like that, and you know, that could maybe add to it as well. But Bob, what's your thoughts on? I know you've got retro in your title, so I'm actually taking it a little bit away from that. But you know, with all the things like Stadia, NVIDIA, what's it called? The online sort of service, the streaming service.
Yeah.
Basically, all of these streaming services will, in your opinion, will they ever hit
xCloud?
xCloud, sort of a perfect. So it feels like you're playing on the console in your own living room. Do you think that'll ever hit that?
So that it depends on the game. You're never going to be able to get a classic game to run the same through a streaming service. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't be on the current platforms. There'd be a lot of trickery involved. You'd end up, every time you loaded a game, you'd have to download it onto the local device, like, because even the fastest ping times across the internet is still about a frame. It's still about 16 milliseconds. That's for the fastest. It's usually quite variable, and you know, we've all had things like online chats like this one where, you know, people talk over each other because there's a delay. That's the same delay you're fighting with any of these streaming services. So not for classic games, but for more modern games, there's certainly ways that people have been working on doing stuff like this. A company that I'm a huge fan of is called Parsec Gaming. And they have a very specific way of doing stuff like that, where like if you do it on your local computer. So like, let's say I have a computer, you know, a fast computer with a good video card in my office, which is, you know, the corner of my apartment, but let's pretend it's an office. And then I have a big TV in my living room. I could get like a Raspberry Pi or a NVIDIA Shield and load their software on it and play whatever is on my computer on my living room TV with zero added latency. It's just because there's no going over the internet. It's all on your local network. Of course, wired, you know, you don't want to do that wireless. So, you know, there's potential for this stuff. It's just dealing with the internet latency and the bandwidth. So I think we'll probably hit a place someday for stuff like Stadia, but you can do that today locally. That is totally able to accomplish that.
Because that's what they're talking about with the next generation of sort of Xbox One Series X, that it is going to be you'll stream from your own console. So maybe you'll stream it in your bedroom, or you'll stream it, I don't know, in your spare room or something. And I think from what you just said there, it sort of sounds quite exciting that you can actually, okay, yeah, well, I'll have my console set up. You could even have it out the way somewhere, just in the cupboard, and then actually stream it all around the house and just have sort of, I don't know, it's quite a sort of minimal look, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I can't speak for any of the technologies I haven't tested yet. So who knows? Who knows if any of these companies are going to do it right? But I do think that that's going to be something that's a big help, and that's something that a lot of people have always talked about. You know, even it's not just for kids, but imagine you're an adult with some kids who want to play their games, but now it's time to go to bed. So get out of the living room, go into your bedroom and play, or, hey, there's a bunch of family over. I'll go downstairs and hook it up to a projector or whatever. So having one central location or one main TV with the different boxes like that would be a good way to do it. I think wasn't PlayStation TV trying to accomplish that as well?
Yeah, you could put like the Vita games in, and you could also run the PlayStation Now on it. I think they've cancelled that availability on
you can stream. You can, if you had a Vita, you could stream from your PS4, PlayStation 4. But of course, it was missing buttons, and it was all wireless.
I'd never tested it, but all I heard was nightmare stories about it. And the one thing everybody's going to realize is if you want anything reliable, you could never use wireless. That's something that my old job, I did a lot of testing on this because they were trying to do video distribution through hospitals over wireless. And my first day on the job, I said, can't be done. Let me prove it to you. And one of them, the guy was a PhD from MIT. So he was very offended when I said that. And he went through talking about all of the testing they'd done and their proof of concepts. And I went, okay, give me 5 minutes and I'll break it. And I showed him all of the different interference things and all of the ways that we had tested, in the job I had before that. And it's just impossible. I mean, you have to have such a controlled environment, and anybody that lives in the city, you're already surrounded by thousands and thousands of networks, whether you like it or not. So that's just kind of a tip for anybody doing anything in their house or apartment is if it has an Ethernet jack, plug it in, and everything becomes way more reliable.
Yeah, there's also the app as well that Sony brought out for the Mac and the PC, the PS4 Remote Play app, and I tried it once. Got it connected to my PS4 Pro, and this is all through my home network. It wasn't like doing PlayStation Now or anything directly to my PS4, and it was just kept cutting out. I've got decent network as well at home, and it was just awful. And you had to plug your DualShock 4 into your laptop, and I was using a MacBook, which doesn't have normal USB ports, and it just wasn't a great experience. Whereas like something like a Switch, where it's not all being streamed to you, but I could just plug it into the dock and I've got it on the big screen. I want to go in my bedroom and carry on playing, I'll just take it out of the dock, keep on playing it. Kind of the best solution for that kind of like moving around a house situation at the moment, as probably was the Wii U before it. Although you had to be fairly close to the Wii U because it would cut out if you go for a dump or something, and it's far away from the unit. But yeah, and for me, I mean, I've lived in apartments for the past 10 years now, I guess, and apartments in cities. So the Wii U was pretty much useless. That gamepad was useless unless I was direct line of sight to the Wii or to the Wii U, 6 feet away. Anything past that, even around the corner, like it just would stop working. It was it wasn't that. The range was pretty poor. Yeah,
I watched a video about 5G, and it's not obviously all the crazy stuff that's going on at the moment with it, which is all obviously complete sort of bullshit. But Linus Tech Tips was doing a video, and he was going, okay, right, there's the antenna up there. I'm getting 200 megabytes download, amazing speeds. Went behind a tree, and it dropped from 4G or 5G down to 4G or LTE or something else. It goes, oh, now I'm getting 4 gigabytes or 4 megabytes download a second, and it was just like, okay, so everyone's talking about this 5G, and it's like if you get behind a bus, or in front on the wrong side of a tree or something, and it would be great if you're sitting in that perfect position, but.
In the advert, I have in the advert. It's just really funny because when I was we had a whole episode about working in retail because me and Stu both worked in shops. I actually worked in the Apple store on Regent Street. I was one of them happy, clappy, store people, which you probably see a lot around New York with the stores they've got there. But yeah, worked in the Regent Street one. I remember this person wanted to buy like a MacBook or one of the laptops, and they asked me, "Oh, so if I'm working like you using the internet on this like airport Wi-Fi thing, if like a fly like goes like buzzes near my laptop, will that cut the internet out?" And I just looked at him and was like, "Hey, check this out." And I picked it up, the laptop, and I waved my hand around it. I was like, "Look, completely stable, it's staying." And she was actually blown away. And it was just like, that is the level of, misconceptions that people might have about how wireless stuff works. There was another person that thought, you shouldn't use Wi-Fi because you'll definitely get like cancer or something. And it's like, it's a really bad age we live in with like Wi-Fi. And I was like, you've grown, the radio, right? And she was like, well, yeah. And TV. And she's like, yeah, well, you've grown up around various sort of signals going on around
microwaves.
Microwaves are not exactly identical to what Wi-Fi uses, but yeah, it's just.
There was a video by a British guy, Bob, this week called Simon Dan, and he did a sort of video sort of debunking all of this about sort of 5G and explaining the how there aren't any risks to 5G. You don't need to burn down antennas on tops of buildings and stuff. But it's a good video to sort of watch. I think it's his second or third one pass. But I've got a question for you, actually. I watched the Digital Foundry video, probably about 3-4 months ago with John Linneman did it. And he actually had his really good gaming PC, and he actually had it set up to a CRT monitor at 1080p. So it's his up-to-date computer, and he was actually he couldn't believe how good the colors looked and what an amazing experience it was. And it was almost like, well, actually, I'm getting a better experience here with some Sony monitor from I don't know, let's say 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It does 1080p. It's obviously I don't quite know that it refreshes so much quicker than what a normal sort of LCD or flat screen TV. What's your thoughts on using sort of CRTs in modern gaming PC setups?
Well, where do you think John got that idea from?
Oh, did he? Oh, fair enough. There you go.
No, I mean, all kidding aside, John's a friend of mine. Not only is he a friend, I'm a giant fan of his work. But I've been telling him this since I think right before we met, and I did the interview with him. I've been talking to him about that, and I've my experience with that was more like, yes, you could use a PC, check out how good it looks, but for me, it was more when the Wii U DS titles came on, so the emulated Virtual Console DS, I switched over to using my CRT monitor for that because there was so much lag in the emulation of those games. I wanted it to cut it back. But for me also, it was certain movies and TV shows. So movies with a lot of film grain look phenomenal in 480p on a CRT if you have the ability to. And TV shows that were originally shot in 480i just look so much sharper if you watch them in 480i on a CRT. So that's a conversation that we'd had for a while, but the actual PC gaming part of it, I completely and totally agree. And to be honest, the main reason I don't use my CRTs, the ones that are compatible at least for 720p and up, is because if you have a good one like a BVM or like the monitor John showed in that video, which is actually the same tube as a D24, so really high-end tube, it's essentially going to look like a flat screen. You're not going to have scan lines. It's going to look so sharp, and what you do get is the faster refresh rate and zero lag. So for me, it's. I would use CRTs for movies to change the look, but for PC gamers, yeah, absolutely. And the only thing that I'm not sure, I watched the video, but I can't remember if John made the point. He was showing off a very rare and very expensive monitor. You could do everything he was doing with a cheap bargain bin, yellow plastic Dell CRT monitor. You might only be able to get like a 1280 by 1024 resolution, or maybe a little bit more, but it's still going to accomplish everything that he said. You're going to get the better colors, you're going to get the better refresh rates, the smoother motion, and something that you could probably get for free if you just, keep an eye on Craigslist or something like that. So
I think the next question is, how do I convince my girlfriend that I need a massive, great big monitor in the spare room? That's going to be the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is space concerns is something that people always talk about, which is why I'm so excited that we have things like the RetroTink line of products, the OSSC, and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it, and it's the same thing with retro gaming too. If you have any CRT, anything, something with an RF connector that you found on the side of the road, that's an amazing experience. That's perfectly good. You don't need any fancy cables. You could totally just play your Nintendo or Super Nintendo or whatever through it. But now you have this big bulky thing that, will eventually require some maintenance. And it's like getting a classic car, right? Even if you buy one completely restored, you're going to have to work on it at some point. Whereas if you buy a brand new car, you could lease one and then just give it back when you're done. So it's the same type of thing with display technology.
If you were to get one of these old CRT monitors, now I'm assuming they've all got a VGA connector. How would you connect that to a 2080 Ti or something? Are there just adapters that you can buy, or? Yeah,
so I have them. Shameless plug here. I have them all linked in my Amazon store to ones that I test on a regular basis. They're generic adapters, so they might look slightly different from when they arrive that they do in the picture, but the ones that run off a couple of specific types of chips, they don't add any lag whatsoever. Because they don't scale an image. They just take digital and make them analog, a DAC, digital to analog converter, and that's all they do. And I've seen different complaints about certain ones, but in that scenario, I can't imagine it's going to hurt anything. It certainly won't add any lag. It's just some people say, oh, some of these crush the colors, but not. In my testing, the ones I've linked to have been pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, you also got some consoles that kind of had some support for monitors, like also the obvious ones, the Dreamcast.
Right.
That's probably the best possible screen you could have for a Dreamcast, I guess, is the VGA as a VGA monitor. Well, as long as the games you're playing do actually support it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could even use light gun games on that. It's just the only issue is if there's any games that don't support 480p. That's not going to work right on a VGA monitor, because VGA CRT monitors don't know what 480i and 240p are. They only know 480p and up. So
okay, that's a good, interesting tidbit there. If you're looking to hook up to a monitor, so I think it's forgotten about, isn't it? People associate, it's CRT TVs. That's what everybody wants to hook up to. But there's tons of these, like, kind of, well, they're not crappy, but generic Dell monitors that have, probably in all kinds of junkyards and people's basements and attics, and they're great. They're a lot cheaper than maybe trying to hunt down a PVM, or anything like that, which can get quite expensive. So we've actually got a few more questions. We've got probably some quick fire ones that will be very simple for you to answer, and then we've got a few that might end up with us going down a rabbit hole, which is either way is good, I think, because it's all really. We're all nerds and we like nerding out on this stuff. So let's do it. I've got one that's probably going to be a quick one. It might be a quick one. We'll see. What would you say is the hardest retro console to get working on a modern TV? So that's considering the kind of signal it outputs, if it needs loads of mods to get anything out of it. What would you say is the hardest?
PC Engine Duo or Turbo Duos, because there's so much involved in that. First of all, you have to. They all have capacitors that are leaking, and if you don't, if they're not already broken, they will be soon. And if you don't mess with that, all the capacitor fluid will leak out and destroy the board, making it completely useless. So you can't even repair it after that. Yeah, and on top of that, that outputs a signal that's a little bit off standard. So for a regular CRT, that shouldn't ever be a problem. But for BVMs and for flat screens, it could cause a problem. So you could have some compatibility issues.
You actually did a really good video on the different options for the PC Engine and the TurboGrafx, because it is the most probably confusing of all the sort of retro consoles, because all these weird variations. we did an episode, TurboGrafx PC Engine 101, where we kind of went through them because I'm kind of a bit of a PC Engine fan, so I'm fairly up to speed on it. But what would you say? I mean, we would recommend we go and watch Bob's really good in-depth video on them, but for people that are listening right now, what would you say is the go-to setup for like a PC Engine or a TurboGrafx coming in terms of the actual original consoles?
With the, assuming that you want to use the original console, I would I would get one of like the either a TurboGrafx or Core Duo or just Core Graphics systems, the basic ones, and use the SSDS3. And that just gives you RGB output, plus it gives you support for CDs, hue cards, and everything. And then just grab like the 2X SCART or something, or the Rad 2X, and hope everything's compatible. But to be honest, I mean, that's why I was kind of praising the TurboGrafx Mini, because hardcore gamers are not going to like that. They're not going to deal with that lag, which is exactly what I talked about before. But if you just want to play those games on something that kind of sort of feels original, there is none of this stuff to worry about. You just plug it in and go, and just deal with the lag as it comes. But yeah, I would buy one of the non-Duo consoles and use a plug-and-play solution. And there's actually new stuff coming out in 2020, assuming it's still 2020 because of all the delays for the PC Engine that's going to work on. I mean, there's actually just a bunch of stuff coming out that'll try to help this compatibility issues. So at the moment, it's more of a crapshoot, but we're all working on it.
Yeah, I'd go with that as well, because I've got the original white PC Engine unit, which is super cheap, probably about the cheapest of all the PC Engines you can get. Jack that into the Super C SD System 3. That's quite expensive, but you've hopefully saved some money on the actual PC Engine. And yeah, I've had really good results with that. Bit of a pain having to get all the ISOs and everything onto your SD card, but that kind of can't be avoided really. But yeah, I mean, Stuart, I think you had a question, didn't you, about the lag, I think, on the TurboGrafx?
I mean, what was it? I watched Happy Console Gamer's video earlier on today, and he did a review or an unboxing and first impressions of the TurboGrafx Mini. And if you know, was it Johnny from Happy Console Gamer? He's is a big fan of the TurboGrafx, and he sort of said, actually he loved it. It's really good. It brings up lots of memories. But he mentioned almost like a couple of games with the lag were almost sort of unplayable. But it was really, okay, it's only a couple of games. But, what's your general thoughts on it? Is it worth getting?
I mean, it's all about situation, right? If you already own original hardware, I would say no, just try to work on another solution. And especially if you get stuff like the 2X SCART and an RGB solution, because now you could use it with not just that, but other stuff. But if you just want to plug in and play bonk, then just get the Mini and understand that that's what you're going to have to deal with. And, there's tricks too, like playing it on a computer monitor. Generally speaking, computer monitors have less lag than TVs. Not all, and not in all cases, just saying, So if you want a solution like that, there's still options available, but it's just, I think the reviewer hit the nail on the head. There's just some games that you could get the general experience of like, I remember how this game looked and sounded, but it's not the same experience. You're not going to be able to grind through and memorize your moves and plan everything perfectly. You're just going to start losing, and you're going to have no idea why, and the variable lag is why.
Yeah. It's actually interesting. There's one game that I think really makes you, when you can really feel lag on the TurboGrafx, is actually Bonk's Adventure, because he's got a very unique kind of momentum to him. The character of Bonk is nothing. You when you start playing it, you think he's going to be like Mario, really super slippery, very quick, and all that stuff, and super responsive. But he actually isn't. He's got a lot more weight to him, probably because he's got a huge head, so then he's got to be like that to a degree. But yeah, you'll really feel sort of how slow he is to accelerate, and I think that feels when you're just like walking along, and then also jumping. His jump is a lot more laggy. Like, he doesn't just go, there's like kind of a frame of animation of him jumping up to the actual act of him jumping. So you really feel it a lot with that game. So I don't know if that is one that's kind of the one that you would recommend is, if you want to test it and to see what it feels like, that's the game. But that's what I've noticed, like going from using like the current setup I have on my HDTV with the PC engine, which I know there is lag on, to my Turbo Express, I can actually feel the difference and feel that the Turbo Express is more responsive. As that's just, I think is it composite video that the little screen on that uses?
Yeah, for the stock one, there are some aftermarket upgrades that could use RGB, but yeah, you're right. It's just a composite screen.
Yeah, so that's something I'd recommend if anybody wants to sort of see how it feels. Another one that I've got for you, Bob, is there a console out there that you feel is maybe lacking in terms of mod options or options to connect to a modern TV, or just options to make it easy to get the games on it or to get more games available? Is there a console that you think you would like to see more sort of modern solutions, whether it's controllers, connections to a TV? Is there one there that you think needs a bit more love?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one specific thing, but I could definitely think of a generalization. Is any console that doesn't have any CD-based console that doesn't have an optical drive emulator, I think they all should get one. And I was just the other day, I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud, but I had picked up a Philips CDI.
So why did you waste your money, Bob?
Right,
Bob.
I promised you help from Wrestling with Gaming. I've been promising him for 2 years now that I would play Thunder in Paradise. I'd stream that.
Flowers of Robert Mapplethorpe.
Yeah. Right. I ended up getting two. My buddy Chris from Belgium helped me out with getting a PAL version, and I got an NTSC version. And neither read CDRs, and only one of them reads original discs. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, right there, yeah.
They're both supposed to be able to read CDRs as well. So it's obviously the laser assemblies are dying, and good luck trying to find a replacement CDI laser assembly, right? You're gonna have to find something that's similar and cannibalize something else. So I think I wish all CD based consoles would have some kind of optical drive emulator. And same thing with original consoles. Anything with a cartridge, I'd like to see ROM carts for it for the same reason. Because as much as I am genuinely a fan of taking a game, plugging it in, and having the real feel as the original one did, these things aren't going to last. The consoles are going to outlast the games in the CD era. That's for sure. So let's just try to keep a way to keep these things going as long as possible.
Yeah, you can imagine like an Atari 2600 will probably still be going, way longer than like your 3DO or your even like an Xbox 360 or a PS3 fat,
Yeah, most definitely.
Crazy. Yeah.
Something that I saw quite a few things on this week, and I noticed you commented on it, Bob, was the Polymega, and that's almost like, okay, so it's you still got the problem of disc rot and things like that, and if you got your old Saturn games. But, arguably, if you can get them on there, then it sounds like you can install them and hopefully save them for, forever or for at least a good few years onto the console. And I watched MVG's Modern Vintage Gamers video, and I was actually like, yeah. I think I want to sign up for one of these. And I went to the website. It's a little bit pricey. We're being furloughed at the moment, so
yeah.
But I mean, so what is pricey? Because I tried to, I misunderstood the Polymega from the beginning. I'd already, I apologized about it. I tried to make up for it, but I think trying to understand what Polymega is the important part. So let's say that you have, let's say you want to ask the question, I have a Sega Saturn, how do I play that on my flat screen TV? Then you go through what we just talked about, and then you go through the aging laser questions, all the way up to RGB output, lag, and all that other stuff. And, original controllers, you get do the buttons in your controller start to wear down? Do you need controller repair kits? I mean, there's just, there's a lot of steps involved. Whereas a Polymega, you just put your disc in. So what's it like, $300 or something? I forgot the price. Please excuse me.
I don't know. I saw some deluxe edition. And actually, for what it does, I actually think it's a fair price. It's more of a case of, with the climate at the moment, I'm thinking let's get that maybe once everything's sort of a little bit more sort of settled. That's my opinion. But what sort of I found a little bit confusing was MVG sort of said, I don't know his name actually. Demetrius, yeah. And I remember watching his videos and he goes, "Oh yeah, I live in America." "Oh, you're an Australian guy." So I always found that a bit confusing. But he was, "Oh yeah, the PlayStation, plays 95%. I'm making up numbers here. 95%. Saturn, plays 97%. And then something like the Mega CD, Sega CD, that play maybe sort of 60% of games." And in my mind, I thought, well, hold on, surely the Sega CD and consoles like that would be slightly easier to sort of emulate rather than the Sega Saturn, which in my mind has always been sort of the holy grail. That's a really tough one to emulate because it's got 2 different processors and things like that. But they seem to hit the nail on the head with the Saturn, but then it needs a little bit of work with some of the older systems that it plays. So I guess what's your thoughts on that, really?
So any emulation, hardware or software, all depends on how well it's written. So you have BU, I never get it right, but the developer that created Hygen and all those amazing Super Nintendo emulators.
Oop. So I just dropped lots of things. Don't worry. Carry on.
All good. But you have that one, which is an amazingly powerful tool that could emulate something, the Super Nintendo, near perfectly, if not perfectly. And with run ahead mode, that lag comes down to almost non-existent depending on your computer. But that's all because of the thousands and thousands of hours worth of work put into it. And that's really what it comes down to, is for Polymega to offer all of these emulators, they would not only have to use a combination of open source stuff and develop it on their own. And there's just not a team of people in the world that, would be able to do that under a budget for a company. So I think they made the right decision in concentrating on the CD based stuff. And kind of just adding some of the other things as a bonus. But, I also think they should, just my opinion, of course, I'm not trying to tell them how to run their business, but I also think that they should concentrate on the stuff where there isn't a good solution. So Saturn, definitely. And like PC Engine CD, Neo Geo CD, those are all tricky consoles. And, whereas if you really want to play Sega CD right now, you can get a Mister, you can get a Mega SD, you can get Crix's upcoming cart, play it, for original hardware. There's a lot of really good ways to play Sega CD, and the only good way to play Saturn at the moment is on a Saturn. So
yeah, it's quite interesting, and I mean, if I were to go down the route, and I divulge, I think it's a good product, is I can't see myself actually getting it and then getting all the other sort of components to play the Mega Drive games or the Super Nintendo games or things like that. I think I would actually have it as a good CD based sort of emulation unit and not really sort of go much further than that, because I think there's probably so many other better ways of, the PC I'm sitting on now, I could, download one of 10 different emulators, and the ones you just mentioned there are pretty good. But
so you brought up 2 points just now. First of all, I've heard a lot of people say exactly that, and I already have a very good computer. Why am I going to drop all this money when I could just emulate it then? And that's part of the thing about the Polymega, is it's not for you then. It's for the people that go, how do I just play this disc? I don't want to screw around with anything. But the other side is, I agree that myself personally, that it has all of these original consoles and 10 ways to play them. Excuse me. I'm not going to buy like the Sega Genesis module. That would be useless to me. However, if they're able to implement some of the HD rendering and widescreen patches of the Super Nintendo games, I would love to see what that's like. Especially if they have it pre-tweaked and all of that. So, I think that they're trying to walk a fine line between, it's a console for people that don't want to tinker, but I think they're at least looking into options for the more advanced crowd that want to have an experience they can't really get anywhere else. So at the moment, yeah, I would say it's for CD consoles, and I'll be patient and see where the platform goes to. But it's definitely not for everybody, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, nothing really is for everybody except like water. So
yeah. Like in terms of the Saturn, actually, and like the necessity of needing to be able to play CD-based consoles with the drives failing and things like that. I mean, I'm lucky that both of the Saturns I have still work fairly well with discs, but I know that's a matter of time before they don't anymore. There's actually been a few options that have popped up over the last few years, things that completely replace the optical drive. And we've also got like the satiator, which will obviously plug into the video card port, where the video card used to go, video CD card. I mean, out of all those options for the Saturn, I mean, which do you think is the one that is probably going to be the best one, or one that you think you would go for?
So I'm actually reviewing the Fenrir now. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
But it's the optical drive emulator for it. And that it just plugs in. So you still have to unbolt the console. You still have to, pop out the ribbon cable. So there's just people that aren't good at this, and that's not an insult. There's a ton of things that I'm terrible at, and I recognize that. So you have to at least understand how to take apart electronics and how to unplug a connector that's been sitting for 30 years inside a plastic receptacle. You got to make sure that you don't rip the wires out and stuff like that. So as long as you have the most basic skills, that one, and a compatible Saturn, because I think they're only compatible with Model 1s, the 20 pins. So as long as you have something that's compatible, then I think that's my choice for now, simply because it works fine and it's already available. However, I do love the thought of anybody just popping out the tray in the back of their Saturn, no disassembly, it's just the same tray or the same door that covers the battery, and then just sliding in the satiator and being done with it. I love that. I also love that you could keep your original drive should you want to, but there's no price announced. So if that's $250 and the Fenrir is $100, then no, I wouldn't recommend that at all.
Yeah.
So I guess time will tell. But the Fenrir I've been very impressed with. It's and it's saved. The most time that it's saved so far is whenever the disc is idle and spins back up. The Saturn's original drive has to wait until the disc is up to speed and the laser is centered before it starts reading data. Whereas the optical drive emulators, the moment the Saturn pulls it for data, it's already ready. So you'll save a few seconds here or there in load times, but you'll save like 5 or 6 seconds each time you would have normally had to respool the drive. So you do get the bonus of it loading faster.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the one that I'd like to go for. I mean, it's kind of been in a really long beta testing period, which is, obviously fine because it's just this one dude is doing it. We can't expect it to be like a retail kind of, big business that's making them. But that's the one that I definitely think I'll go for. I like the idea of keeping my optical drive, available, because I've got a ton of Saturn. I've got like, over 100 Saturn games, so I want to be able to keep using them. And yeah, it's just obviously, something where I don't have to open up the console is kind of always nice as well. As much as I'm fairly confident with doing that. There's always a risk you might, slip and fall over and headbutt the top of it and break it all or something, or drop it on the floor. Or
well, I mean, what happened to me was I replaced it, and then all of a sudden audio is crackling, and I'm going, what the hell? And so I spoke to the team behind it, and they said, oh, it's probably the flex cable. So I reseated the flex cable. Same problem. So I ordered a new one. The flex cables are a generic thing that you could buy from DigiKey. So that was lucky. Plugged the new one in and it worked fine. So I said, okay, let me plug the old one back in so I can get recordings and warn people about this. And the old one's now working fine again. So it's, so that's something I take stuff apart every single day and have my whole life pretty much, as part of my day job too. So even for me, who's used to this stuff, to have a flex cable that was a little bit off, I mean, that's just one more thing you have to worry about and one more point of troubleshooting if something goes wrong. Whereas the satiator, you just plug it in.
That's what sort of appeals to me about it. So hopefully quite kind of a fun question. What would you say is your favorite mod or kind of modern accessory to an old console, whether that's, something like the satiator, for example, or just simply the Rad2X cables or a cool wireless controller for an old console? What would you say is what your favorite, or maybe there's a few favorites that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I got two answers for that. So as somebody who, as the person who's running RetroRGB, my favorite's the Rad2X, just because for years now, anytime somebody said, look, I'm not technical about how do I get this connected to my TV, there was a long explanation with a bunch of if, ands, or buts in it. And right now, the true answer is if your console is one of the ones compatible with the Rad2X, you plug it in. And that's the end of the story. So from a personal point of view, I think the Mega SD was my favorite in the past couple of years because it's, Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and then 32X ROMs or cartridges all on one thing. I thought that was really cool. I never in a million years thought that was going to be possible on a cartridge. I thought you were always going to have an original Sega CD with an optical drive emulator in it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would always need, because it goes through the cartridge port. I always thought there was some extra lines on the port on the side that meant that's the only way that it could read the disc from a Mega CD. But obviously, it can work through the cartridge port, which is absolutely amazing. And Mega CDs are especially the first model is so prone to failure as well. I think the capacitors and like the tray itself. I don't know about the Mega CD2, obviously the flip top one. I don't know if that's a bit better or not. Do you know if is that more reliable generally?
Yeah, I mean, because you don't have the helical gear, which always dies in the Sega CD ones. That's the gear that spins, and the teeth on it is what raises and ejects the tray. Right. So when that starts to wear down, the tray won't eject, and then you get the discs that won't boot. I just realized, though, that both my answers weren't mods. They were accessories.
That's fine. That's what I said. Accessory works. I mean, for me, it probably is an accessory as well, because I really like having wireless controllers for old consoles, so I can kind of sit away from them as much as, you might get a little bit of lag on some of them, like the retro bit. Although I find I'm having trouble with the retro bit controllers for the Saturn and like the Mega Drive. Mm-hmm. I find that if you don't play use the controllers for maybe a week, the batteries just die, and you've got to charge them from scratch. There, I mean, the Crix controller, wireless controller, is awesome. I can leave that for a decade, and the battery will still be able to run. But I guess they just put maybe I'm not slagging off retro bit at all, but I don't know if they put just poor quality batteries that don't hold their charge if they're left idle for a week or something. But I've had real trouble with that. Do you use those controllers at all?
I do. I have wireless controllers for every console because when I do my testing, it just makes it much easier. But the Crix controller is the only wireless controller that I absolutely use as I treat it like a wired controller. The Retro USB AVS controller I also really like a lot. I just don't play NES as much these days as other consoles, but the Crix one is phenomenal, and I have the Retrobit ones, and they give me a ton of trouble all the time. And it's just once it's charged and synced, they seem to work well for me.
Yeah.
But, I have to sync mine every time I turn my Saturn on. I don't know what's up with that. I don't think.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I've noticed that. It's weird.
Yeah, and I've had other people tell me that they've synced once and never again. So I don't understand what's up with that.
Yeah, it's the battery thing that gets me. I mean, I'll play it for because the way I am with consoles, I'll kind of go crazy on one console for a couple of weeks, and then I'll go back to another one. So if I play a Saturn for a week, and then I'll go start playing my Genesis / Mega Drive for the rest of the next week, I'll go back to the Saturn, and the pad will be dead, and I'll be like, I just charged you last time I used it. It's weird. But another sort of quick one potentially as well, question wise. Obviously, you've got your website and you've got your comments and your videos. You've got a lot of ways that people can kind of hit you up and ask you about, old consoles and issues that they have with them. Which system would you say is the one you get the most questions about?
Geez, I wouldn't even know. I turned off. I don't publish my email anymore, and I turn off DMs in most places because it was at a point where I was getting hundreds of emails or messages total a day.
Oh, really? Oh my God.
And then people would get genuinely offended when I didn't take the time to respond. And I even get people now Like, you know, I say there's mostly no such thing as a stupid question, but I, for the first time in my life, been discovering what a stupid question is.
Yeah.
I've gotten 3 or 4 emails in the past few months on my eBay channel, because I don't sell stuff, like I just sell my extras, from people that said things like, hey, I know you're too busy to answer emails, so I figured I'd message you here. I have a setup with 15 consoles. Can you tell me how I could set each one of them up to get the best quality? And it's like, first of all, fuck you.
Google it.
Right? And second of all, that's hours worth of discussion. Yeah. So, like, well, I do very much enjoy helping people. And I love the Q&As that I do. I love the fact that I get to interact with supporters that way, and I get to help as much as I can. But that's like 1 day a week that I dedicate to doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just that I try to help where I can, but I could, if I turned emails and messages back on, I could sit in front of a computer 24/7 and not get to all of them. So it's just impossible for me.
In my mind, I kind of feel like the N64 is the one that a lot of people that I always hear. Yeah, so I wanted to play a few rounds of GoldenEye, like I was when I was in college or whatever, and they plug it into their 4K TV if it has if they're able to get it in there, or even just a HDTV, and they're like, it looks terrible. I don't remember it looking this bad, etc., etc. How do I get a good? Would you say that's probably one of the trickiest ones to get? Looking decent, because obviously the video output quality it has on it isn't great in the first place. So
no, I actually think that's the opposite. I think
oh wow,
the more I really look into the N64, because that was never my favorite console, but the more all of these analyzing I've done on it, from the deblur mods to the Rad2X and the OSSC and all this stuff, I actually found that turning the filter on any of the RetroTink products on, so Rad2X, RetroTink, whatever, created a smoothing blur, if you will, that actually did a great job. I don't use any of the deblur options for almost any game on the N64. And I even, in all honesty, think that composite video, because, I would prefer a sharper image, but composite video with that same filter. So the Rad2X is a good example. I think that looks perfectly fine because it's smoothing things out in a way where you're kind of blending stuff together to almost fake it to look like a more modern game. Whereas if you did that with any 2D games, like games from the era before that, it would look terrible. It would just look like you're completely changing the look of the game. Whereas on the N64, you're blending it all together. And in the PlayStation 1, I guess, same thing. So yeah, I think that's pretty easy for N64.
Yeah. I could imagine as well, like if you're anything like me and Stu, and you probably are, you probably use emulation and original hardware for whatever scenarios. I mean, in what sort of situation do you typically sort of lean to original hardware? Like, is that because you've got a nice room that you can go in where it's all set up and you do that in there? Or do you prefer to use emulators like most of the time, and maybe you occasionally just dig out an old console? What would you say was the situations for both of them that you tend to?
Well, first of all, I live in Manhattan, so the room to go into is my only room.
Yeah, but, we know the pain. This is London, so yeah.
Yeah, but for me personally, 2D games. So pre N64 for the Nintendo ones. Pre Dreamcast, and then as far as Saturn and PS1 go, the 2D games versus the 3D games. So any 2D games I prefer on original hardware or on the Mister on a CRT, almost always without exception. Whereas the 3D games, depending on the game, I don't actually have much time to play anything. So when I do enjoy experimenting. But the 3D games, I find emulation to be a big help for specific things. Like I just tried a PlayStation 2 emulator. Actually stole the idea from John Lunneman from his Virtua Racing video. But I played I think it was Outrun 2006 or Outrun Coast to Coast, whatever it was, natively being rendered in, I think it was 1080p with through emulation onto my TV. I just kind of used my laptop and then outputted it to the TV. Yeah. And it was ridiculous. It was so good. The quality of it was absolutely amazing, because I think those 3D games are really meant to create a look of even a 1994 game is meant to create the look of a newer modern game. They just didn't have the technology to do it.
Yeah.
So being able to render in higher resolutions and any kind of blending, I think is pretty cool. But anytime you change the look of a 2D game, those were all kind of meant to look the same. And that's what I don't really like about, or don't really think is necessary with emulation in newer games, plus the lag and everything we talked about.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point about the PS2 specifically, because like with that sort of 6th generation of consoles, we were kind of in that in-between era where, 3D games have become fairly well established, and the hardware was now powerful enough for things to not look like super blocky and pixelated and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they were still limited by what the displays at the time could actually show. So now you can kind of get rid of that, and you can just have, the graphics get upscaled, and it looks like people always use like Final Fantasy on like PS2 as like an example, and they look pretty close to like even like PS3 and 360 games. Or when you see like when they do PS2 classics on PS4, they have aged nowhere near as much as like a PS1 game, because there was plenty of power behind. There's plenty. The models of the characters have a ton of polygons, more than enough to get rid of everything has that cool like anime look to the characters that hasn't really aged, I don't think. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, for me, I think I go to emulation when I kind of feel like I'll benefit from the quality of life things that you get from an emulator, like a game that really needed a save. Like Legend of Zelda 1 or something, if you would before a dungeon, or a game that didn't have a save. I would rather play that on an emulator, or a game that people are going to hate you when I say this, but really the rewind function of some of them was really nice, because there isn't any way of doing it. I'll go to that, but then on the other hand, I could go and play like River Raid on the Atari 2600 or Contra. Mm-hmm. And I'm not bothered about having a save state on those. I'm quite happy just to keep dying, because I know I'll just keep playing it and I get the enjoyment out of that. It's not a frustrating situation. So yeah, I kind of jump around between them. Stu, I'll leave the last question to you.
I've got one more question. Just before I was checking my YouTube subscription feed, I noticed there's a Crysis Remastered that's just been announced, and I'm sure it's on PC, PS4 and Xbox and PS5 maybe. So obviously now they're remastering the most powerful game ever. Do you think any computer would have enough power to play a remastered version of Crysis? It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of question, that one. What's your thoughts on that?
It's on the Switch, amazingly. So yeah,
I can really only comment to remasters in general on that stuff. And like, I loved Link's Awakening, the remastered one. I do wish that it could have stayed at like a smooth 60 frames per second the whole time, and whatever. But I think if it's done right, it replaces the original for me. So the best example is Metroid Zero Mission. I'll always play that over the original Metroid now. And another Metroid 2 remake. Not only would I play that over the original Game Boy game, but I like it better than the 3DS remake. So, I'm always happy to see remakes of games. I just hope, I always just cross my fingers and hope they don't screw it up.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time it's great to see it, even when like the slightly dubious, like the definitive editions we got, when like the Xbox One and the PS4 came out. It was great. Even those are pretty good. Like Last of Us on the PS4 version, you could play it at 60 frames a second, and you obviously got the benefit from that.
A couple of weeks ago, sorry to interrupt, there was the Panzer Dragoon remake they did, and it kind of got a little bit sort of mixed reviews from that one. And a lot of people were saying, I completed it in an hour, but the original one you can complete in an hour or so. That's what the game was.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common for people to misunderstand the point sometimes, especially, both because it's easy to remember things through rose-colored glasses, or on the opposite, if you never experienced the original and you're trying to compare it to a modern game, you might be thinking, like, what the heck, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like when they brought out the Shenmue 1 and 2 like double pack remaster thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, a lot of people were like, well, it's Shenmue. It's really boring to walk around the town. That's what it was. The original game.
It is boring.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I actually really like Shenmue, but yeah, everyone else I know hates it. I was one of the original guys. I was an original. Got it in 2000 when it came out. Not one of these, people that heard about it 10 years later and think it's amazing. But yeah, when you're building something on the base game and it's not like Resident Evil 2 remake, that's literally a completely rebuilt, almost unrelated game except for the storyline and the characters. It's you're kind of getting the benefit of what a modern game is made like. Whereas, if it's like someone complaining about Virtua Racing on like the Switch, the Sega Ages release. Like, it's only got 3 tracks. I want 50 tracks and all licensed cars and everything. And it's like, it's not the point really, is it? So yeah, but I'm really happy we have these. Like Virtua Racing, by the way, is awesome on the Switch.
It's good.
Agreed. For whatever insane reason, I do still enjoy the 32X version. But the Daytona remake for PS3 and Xbox 360.
Oh, that was awesome. Yeah,
that was perfect. That was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, there were so many of them. Like we talked about it. We've got the last show actually. We talked about the benefits of jailbreaking modern consoles, and we talked a lot about the PS3. And a good reason to do it, obviously we're not condoning stealing games, but for PSN games that have been taken off the PSN store, one of them is Outrun Online Arcade. You can't get that game anymore because Sega don't have the Ferrari license, and that was basically like a 720p upscale version of Outrun 2006. Like it's missing some modes, but you can't get that anymore, and that was amazing. I mean, that'd be a perfect Switch game. Outrun 2006, but I guess they'll have to sort of take out the car models and make generic looking ones like they did with the original Outrun, I think, didn't they? When they released it on like the Dreamcast in Japan, they took the Ferrari out and put a cool looking sports car that was the generic sports car. They didn't keep the Ferrari.
It's got to be a red car.
Yeah. Basically. That's all you need, a cool looking sports car. But yeah, well, that was Bob from RetroRGB. Thank you so much for coming on again. We really appreciate it. Sorry we've kept you here for an hour with us.
No, this is awesome. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So how can we check out your stuff, Bob? Where can we catch you on all the social medias and digital channels and all that kind of nonsense?
Best place is always just the website, retrorgb.com, and of course the YouTube channel. And those are basically my main focus. I am on Twitter here and there, but that's mostly a cesspool, so I've stepped away from that.
Yeah,
but yeah, just everything is linked through the website. So every time there's a new video, it's all posted on there. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you don't mind, because people really take those subscription numbers seriously. But everything is routed right through the website, including not just the news, but all the guides and all the information we've been working on for years now. So that's always the best place to go.
Yeah, the website especially. As Bob has mentioned, I mean, all those questions that some people have about how do I get my NES working with my HDTV? What are the options? What video outputs does this console, that console do? You've basically got all those guides there, and you tell people exactly what they need to get something working on a modern TV. So yeah, check that out. And I think you've got a Patreon as well, and you get benefits from that.
Yeah, Patreon, and I'm also on Floatplane, which is kind of like Patreon, but by the Linus Tech Tips crew. So it's Patreon's good for most people. It's only the minimum of $1 a month.
Yeah.
Whereas Floatplane, the advantages there is it's a much higher quality video. So for any of the 4K stuff that I do, it'll look a lot better on that. And there's no ads. But it's obviously more expensive because they have to pay for their own hosting of their. Yeah. They don't use other people's. So yeah, if anybody wants to support, it's always very much appreciated. Patreon and Floatplane. Yeah, I mean, just keep watching, keep checking out the website, and stay in touch.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Bob. Really appreciate it. So Stu, how can you find us these days? I'm sure people are dying to know.
Yeah, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, Google as well. If you just search Console Shock Podcast. If you search us on Twitter, just Console Shock, and on YouTube, Console Shock. I'm not going to mention the website because I get crazy comments on there that are not related to anything. So I don't really sort of monitor that. So the website's just somewhere to put the sort of the feed for everything. So yeah, check us out on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and iTunes.
Awesome.
Console Shock.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you in the next one. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers. Bye bye.